In today's episode, do shady thing, fire my boss, hide millions from your client? I don't think so. Take a lunch? You sure? Pay me 2 hours now or 40 hours later to fix it plus $40,000 in taxes. So let's get started. Do shady thing, fire my boss, hide millions from your client? I don't think so. Forgive me if this is long. This happened a while ago, but it's still so fresh on my mind. I left college with a business degree in one hand and no job in the other. And like so many colleges, the promises of alumni willing to give jobs to graduates could not have been further from the truth. So I had to seek out my start from the bottom. I found a good job in operations at a company, I can't say who without giving it away. Had a great boss, who taught me pretty much everything I needed to know. Work was great and the money was good. I need to explain how the business worked so you can understand how the plan worked. The corporate office was in California and we were not. There are a lot of things that went on at this company, and I can't get into all of them because it would just take away from the story, but let's just say they had a very Stratton Oakmont vibe when it came to sales. I started out worked in operations with some of the smaller clients, but with some help from my boss, was able to climb the ladder rather quickly to the point of being over all the operations and order processing for the firm. We had a very large client, 90% of the company's business. The way it worked was we had two sets of sales reps, TSRs and CSRs. TSRs were the heavy hitters who reached out to the other big businesses and tech firms to extend their warranties on a product. They made real good money. The CSRs were more of the mom and pop crowd and the inbound sales calls for those that wanted to extend their warranties. The reps were all given codes that associates the client's files with theirs, so if someone did a renewal automatically, they would get paid as it was their client. Pretty sweet gig. The client hired the firm to be the middleman for their B2B as they handled all of their everyday clients. For every $100 that came into our firm, 18% or $18 would be for the company, and the rest would be sent to the clients with the warranties activated. Most of the clients paid by CC or PO with a wire transfer, but there would also be a good amount of checks each week that would need to be processed. A little while after I started, the client check portion was now going to be overseen by one of the sales managers. Didn't really faze me because I was working on the smaller accounts. Since we were a publicly traded company, all the sales reps' orders had to go to operations to be fulfilled. They weren't allowed to process them on their own. This is when things started going downhill. My boss at the time was given temporary access to the financials as they were hiring a new CFO, and he had a background with it. We went to lunch like we had done plenty of times before, but he seemed different. When I asked him if something was wrong, he told me that something looked off with our biggest client for one of the accounts. He wanted to make sure before he said anything to the higher-ups. While this was going on, I had been offered the chance to be our new compliance officer, which means I would need to make sure everything was on the up and up. Soon after, I come in to find out that my boss was just terminated for a multitude of reasons, all of which had to be untrue because he was a pretty well-liked guy with not just with the company, but with our client as well. As I log into my terminal, I see that before he left, he had given me admin access to his files. Here's where things started to pop off. Remember those checks that clients were sending in to renew their warranties? Well, we were cashing them all right. Apparently we just weren't adding those renewals to their products in the system. That would have triggered a payout to our client, who, as you remember, would be getting 82% of that money. Instead, they were cashing the checks, keeping the money, and using the interest in the accounts. Yes, in the mid-2000s banks actually paid interest to cover losses in their collections department. It was wild to see that this was happening, and something had to be done. So I hatched a plan. First things first, secure a new job cause it won't be a fun place to work after this. Done. My previous boss knew of other companies that would scoop me up. Put in my notice, and stated in my exit interview that I just couldn't be a part of what was happening, even though HR was in on this. I wanted it on the record. Next, get approval for overtime for all the operations crew to come in on a Saturday and double pay them. They arrive early Saturday, obviously not too thrilled as to why they are there. But when I explained that if they complete the task, not only so they get their overtime, but they get nice bonuses, they were much happier. They spent the entire day applying all of those checks dated back years to the client accounts. We are talking millions of dollars. When all the sales reps arrived Monday, they were shocked to hell. Not only did they meet their weekly goals before picking up the phones, they made their monthly and quarterly goals too. 2 weeks into the new quarter. Cheers. Partying. Yelling. Screaming. Celebrating. Except sales management. They went from being really excited, to skeptical, to confused, to oh shit in about 2 hours. They realized where it must have come from. Because not only did the company hit all these sales, since it had been over a day, the client came into work Monday to see a very nice payday in their system as well. And like anyone, would have questions, and says they are coming out to congratulate the team on such great numbers. So management starts scrambling because they can't figure out how this happened, and all under my boss's old login. On my last day I arrive and in the lobby. I've got my box for the last of my things, Guy walks up as is waiting for the elevator with me, and we strike up conversation. He notices my box and jokes about getting fired, and I just tell him I had a great opportunity come up, so I decided to leave before shit hits the fan. We laughed. Really nice down-to-earth guy. He realizes we are getting off on the same floor. He asks if I work for X, I say yes. He asks where, I tell him operations, and he reveals that he is the CEO of our client, Gulp. We go our separate ways. Client shows up and there is a big party. Afterwards, the client says that they would love to get a breakdown of where most of the sales came from so they can allocate more money to that department. Management says sure, but it made up a lie about how they can't share client payment info due to regulations, blah blah blah. Cue my exit from the company. 2 weeks go by and I get a phone call from a number I don't recognize, so I let it go to VM. When I get off work I checked it, to find out it was the CEO of the client where I used to work. He has had something come up and would like to talk to me. Of course I'm nervous as hell, but I call him back and he picks up on the first ring, and we get to chatting for a bit, and he finally just asks me, why did you leave? I tell him I had a great opportunity come up. He doesn't buy it and says that apparently my comment about shit hitting the fan really stuck with him, and he thinks something more is going on. So after a little more prodding from him, I tell him just look at collections, and that's all I can say. He thanks me and I hang up. 2 days later, he pulled the plug on the account. Apparently my old company tried to threaten him with a lawsuit for pulling the account 3 years early. He replied with, that's fine, because when I show the courts that I have the evidence that you committed fraud. Corporate came in and cleaned house. All of management was fired within the day. 1 month later, my friends and I had a very memorable trip in Vegas, all courtesy of our old client. Take a lunch? You sure? Obligatory intros. On mobile, * long-time lurker, first-time poster here. Story is not mine, but comes from my dad. TLDR at the bottom. My dad worked for a big-ish cable and internet company for about 12 years, starting around the turn of the century. He enjoyed his job as it helped keep him active. Some very important info about his job. Since he was driving a lot, and used a company van, the company paid for his gas. Each field worker, people who come and troubleshoot, or install/uninstall your services on site, got a route to work that day. This company had a pretty strict policy about being late to a job. If you were 15 minutes late to the scheduled start time, you were to call the customer and explain to them you would not be able to make it that day. The customer then had the choice to either reschedule or cancel. In either case, the company ended up losing money. With the rise of phones, the routes became more digitized. This is where the problem occurs. Most time slots were unforgiving. For example, you would have a job in one city starting at 11 a.m. Your very next job would start at 12:30 p.m., in a city 30 minutes away. Most jobs took between 30 and 45 minutes. This gave most field workers anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes between, give or take due to traffic. Because of this, a lot of the field workers decided to take very quick lunch breaks, or not take one at all. That is, until the new boss was hired. Their original boss knew this was happening, and made sure everyone was okay with it. He, unfortunately, got a promotion. Good for him, bad for his old workers. This new boss, let's call him Jake, was not a fan of not taking a lunch break. He held a meeting with everyone where he told them that they had to take their lunch, punch out, and could not punch back in until the full time was taken. This was problematic for two reasons. Like I said, the time slots were unforgiving for almost everyone. The second reason was because the lunchtime they were given was almost always a full hour. The field workers knew this would not work and told Jake. He did not care. Cue the compliance. Every single field worker started doing exactly that. As soon as they finished a job close to noon, they drove to a restaurant, or a gas station, or an empty parking lot and clocked out for a full hour. They turned their trucks off and ate. This led to a lot of missed jobs. By having every field worker clock out for a full hour, there was a full 60 minutes where nothing was happening, almost at the same time every day. This only lasted about a week before Jake held another meeting. This was not to rescind the policy, however. He had come up with a new idea to make sure no jobs would be missed. If you were on lunch and had a job to go to, you would drive there while being clocked out. The kicker was that gas for these trips would not be paid for as you were not on the job. The field workers, my dad included, were not fans of this. They went to HR and upper management and clued them into what was happening. The very next day another meeting was scheduled. Jake had been let go as his policy had cost the company a lot of money, as having a lot of jobs cancelled led to a lot of customers decided to cancel all their services. I know it was a drastic jump for them, but they were not happy, especially since my dad had the same customer reschedule his job about 3 times and each time it was missed for lunch. The new boss immediately rescinded the lunch policy, and everything went back to the way it was, which was working before. Pay me 2 hours now or 40 hours later to fix it plus $40,000 in taxes. This may not be true malicious compliance, but it makes a fairly good story. A while back I worked as a business consultant, certified public accountant CPA, for young and startup companies. I was hired by a food delivery service client, think Uber Eats type delivery, with a primarily corporate clientele. After setting up the client's systems for payroll, accounting, banking, but not order entry or billing, the owner installed a new state-of-the-art order entry/billing system. The new system seemed to work fine, but sales taxes charged to clients were noticeably low, and seemed to use the same rate for all cities/suburbs and counties, even though each one had different additional rates over and above the base state rate. When brought to the attention of the owner, he insisted the new software company knew what they were doing and were experts in food delivery service billing. Later learned it was a small boutique firm from out of state with a very good salesperson. When I requested access to the system to check tax rates, I was told not to waste billable hours on the new system, because he was certain they know what they were doing, and was unwilling to pay my exorbitant hourly rate to check something that was brand new. I explained if the taxes being collected were wrong, his company would be liable for any shortfall. Showing examples of taxes being underbilled were met with "you don't know what you are talking about." As the business grew, my consulting hours dropped off, just reviewing month-end financial information with the client after closing the books each month, while making the requisite deposits of collected sales tax to the State Department of Revenue. Malicious compliance: I had no control or access over the tax rates being billed, but I did know the state frequently scheduled audits of new companies after their first year of operations. If the client was unwilling to pay for a few hours to check the system, wait until it was necessary to pay for 40 billable hours to handle a state audit. Lo and behold, on the 13th month after installing the new software, a notice was received from the state announcing an audit of the client's sales and use tax payments was scheduled for the following week. To make a long story short, it was found that the new software did in fact only bill the base state sales tax rate, totally omitting both city and county taxes. The assessment for unpaid taxes, including penalty and interest, exceeded $40,000, not including my hourly rate to work with the state auditors. More billable hours were spent by me going back to the larger corporate customers and billing them for unpaid sales tax, recovering almost half of the assessment. Most were willing to pay after my threat to report them to the state for non-payment of use tax. The client blamed me for not insisting more strongly on changing the tax rates, and terminated our relationship after it was felt as much as possible had been recovered from customers. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.